Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. I hope you had a chance to watch the last episode of this podcast. I've been reflecting on some of the things that I've seen, including in that video, which I put as a link in the discussion area to the previous podcast, and trying to come up with a perspective, a viewpoint on how to perceive what is happening right now, whether to the Gazans or to people in the third and fourth worlds everywhere. And here is where I am at right now. The the world is falling apart, in case you hadn't noticed it. And when I say the world, I mean the entire world. The world is falling apart. And why? Because of the domination of the capitalist world system, which is affecting not only the first world, but the third and fourth worlds as well. It's affecting everyone. The kinds of greed bred by capitalism, even in Mexico, which I mentioned in the last podcast, the kinds of greed which is driving the cartels to basically ruin the lives of Mexicans and make life in Mexico intolerable, and to make it virtually impossible for people like me who are not from Mexico to go to Mexico. Now, I don't know what I could do there, but I won't know because I can't go there. The only place I can go safely is Nuevo Progreso. That is a relatively safe place. Why? Because it is a tourist area. Why is it safe? It is safe because the government pays off the cartels not to bother tourists in Nuevo Progreso. Now, that is really upsetting. And I love Nuevo Progreso. I have a good friend who was there that I've made in that city. It's a wonderful town. There are some really good people there. Mexicans in general are very, very fine people. And I love Nuevo Progreso, but I wish I could go to Reynosa. There are other places I wish I could go to, but they're basically blocked off. Um, I mean, I could take, for example, a bus from McAllen, which is right next to me, that goes right into another part of Mexico, but that's even more dangerous than Reynosa is. And so I'm discouraged by that. And look, I don't want to have my finger cut off. I don't want to be decapitated. I think that is a reasonable thing to say. I mean, who would want that? And so here I am in a situation observing this kind of corruption, this unrelenting evil, which seems to be growing without any force to stop it all over the world. And again, not only in the first world, but also in the third and fourth worlds. Again, it is the capitalism which was invented in the first world, the drive for profit, which basically ended agriculture. It replaced agriculture with industry and placed profit at the head of it all. And that is what is driving the world mad. And when I say mad, I'm not exaggerating. That is literally how I see it. The world has been driven mad. I'm not saying that everyone in the world is mad. That would be foolish. Of course not. I would say most people are pretty sane. But the world itself, meaning the structure of the world, the present day world order, for the capitalist world system is simply crazy. So I'm not diagnosing anyone. I'm simply making a statement about the present condition, the present world order. And I don't know what to do about it. Obviously, no one does. I look around and I see people supporting evil. And I will leave that to your imaginations, what I mean. People all over the world defending evil, whether it's the concentration camps for Palestinians, whether it is support for the apparent extermination of the Gazans, or anything else. The world has lost its mind. And I don't know if there is any real remedy available in the context of the present world order. In fact, I think there isn't. That is why what I believe is right now, and I've changed my view on this basically today after speaking with a good friend of mine. She inspired me. Well, she always inspires me. She is a wonderful human being, a wonderful soul. I met her chatting over the phone. We became really good friends, and I talk with her periodically. I would like to talk with her more frequently, but she is a very busy person, and I don't want to bother her that much. I don't know what she would say if I would say that to her. In fact, she might watch this episode and see it and respond to me directly, for all I know. I'm not sure. I know she has watched 2 or 3 of my previous podcasts, so maybe she'll see this one. But I think that ultimately the solution does not lie in condemning particular oppressive nations, whatever they are, whatever they are. And I am still abiding by my promise not to condemn particular nations, not to condemn particular politicians. I think that is a good tactic because condemning nations by name, condemning politicians by name, I think is a road to nowhere. The solution does not lie in condemnation. Not to say condemnation is useless. I think it may have its place. I certainly did it for the last several months here, and I was happy about doing it. But then I looked around and I thought, what good am I doing? Am I really helping to make the world a better place? And my conclusion, especially after speaking with my friend, was no, I'm not. My actions are basically cathartic. Maybe they are cathartic for my viewers as well. The question is, what can we do concretely? Condemning nations is not a concrete action. It is idealistic. It is working with my mind against the minds of people that I may see as my enemies. The solution, I think, lies not in condemnation of particular nations and leaders, but in building or trying to build something new. And so, for that, I turn to Roy Bhaskar's concept of concrete utopia. He actually recommended to other critical realists, that they come up with proposals for a concrete utopia. I have not done that myself. I may at some point, maybe. I need to make sure in my head before I do it that I am not coming up with something like utopian socialism, which Engels condemned, and I'm still not entirely convinced that I can make a clear distinction between utopian socialism and concrete utopia in my own head. I do think that is my own problem. I think there is a way to do it, but I need to figure it out. I need to make sure that whatever proposal I come up with is grounded in the relations of production, is grounded in actual human needs. And the situation that we see around us in the world, the actual deterioration of the human heart, the end, the virtual end of the human conscience. People willing to act overtly in their own benefit, not even pretending to care for others. I mean, when I was growing up, most people, even people who were very, very selfish, would at least make the pretense of caring for others. What I see now is that the pretense is gone. The mask is taken off. There is no more pretense. People, I think, feel, I guess, liberated, although it's not what I would call liberty. Liberty to me is emancipation from oppression. And as I see it, what these people are doing in having no pretense at all about treating other human beings with disdain and contempt is not really liberty. It's imprisonment. It's the prison of self, the prison of one's own self. And we alone are the ones who make that prison for ourselves. Nobody else makes us have that prison. It is we who are the ones who craft it. It is we who are the ones who choose to live within it. At any time we want, we can step outside of it and try to rescue other people who are still within it, and to try to rescue people who are being victimized by those who are the master controllers or the masterful evil people of this world, the people who are the masters of evil, I guess. They're the ones who need to be focused on, but naming them, in my view now, is a worthless activity, at least to me, as I've thought about it in the past 24 hours. The important thing is not naming the evildoers, whether countries or individuals. The important thing is conscientization, which I have been doing. But I think that in focusing so much on nations, in focusing so much on leaders of nations, I have lost what should be my main object. And that is, how can I assist in the transformation of society? How can I engage in conscientization which is my form of critical pedagogy that I am practicing in this podcast as a retired professor. When I was a professor, I taught using critical pedagogy, which was the methodology for teaching that was originated by the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire. And a major part of it is conscientization, critical conscience, and consciousness raising. That, I think, is what we all need to do. That is what I need to do. So that is, I guess, a more well thought out justification for what I am doing. I don't want it to sound like I'm being cowardly or like I have somehow chosen to avoid confronting evil. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, how can anyone avoid confronting evil? But the question is, what is the source of that evil? Is the source of that evil particular countries? Is the source of that evil particular political leaders? No, I would say no. They are certainly carrying out evil, but the source of that evil is the capitalist world system, is the first world. And it is that capitalist world system which needs to come down. That old world order, which is not only torturing people, imprisoning people in concentration camps without any cause whatsoever except power, but is also destroying the planet. Climate change, climate change, climate change. That deserves to be repeated over and over again. Because ultimately, climate change, which is being facilitated by some major companies, particularly petroleum companies, who don't care about the planet. They care about short-term profits. They are at the head of the capitalist world system. That is what I'm concerned about. And so when I see countries, whatever countries, treating the innocent unjustly, when I see any kind of injustice anywhere in the world, I am drawn back to thinking about the capitalist world system and how really it needs to go. If we are to have a socialist or communist world system, the number one principle, I think, that needs to underlie it is unity in diversity, meaning we cannot expect everyone to be the same, to do the same. We cannot even expect everyone to make the same amount of money. Poverty and wealth should be eliminated so that everyone makes something in the neighborhood of the middle. So you would have a middle with degrees, but poverty on one side and wealth on the other would be wiped out. That is what I see as the ideal solution to our immediate problems. But that is only the substructure of a hopeful new socialist or communist world system. That communist world system needs to be based also upon unity in diversity, as I said, which means that we cannot expect our neighbors to be like me. I cannot expect my neighbors to do the same thing that I do. It's unrealistic. There is a lot of misunderstanding of scientific socialism, which is a term I prefer, coined by Friedrich Engels, or Marxism, which is a term that neither Marx nor Engels liked, but it caught on nonetheless. Basically, if my objective is to bring about some kind of scientific socialism in the world, I have to be committed to that principle of unity and diversity, meaning private profit needs to be wiped out. Private ownership needs to be wiped out. By private profit and private ownership, I mean something very precise. I mean capitalism, or the private ownership of capital, where the economic system itself is run by individuals, by capitalists, for their own benefit, while throwing breadcrumbs to their workers, and by giving nothing to the subaltern, the othered or marginalized peoples of the world. But that is the world that we live in right now. In a true system of unity and diversity, everyone will care about everyone else. And there will not be a system of private profit or private ownership. However, personal profit, personal ownership is an entirely different matter. For example, I own this microphone. I own the webcam that I'm looking into right now. I own my condo. I own the light fixtures and things that you can't see around me because of this magical screen behind me. I own all this stuff. That is not a bad thing. That is perfectly fine, because I am not using the things that I own to oppress anybody else. I am not running an economic system. So it doesn't matter that I own my condo and my microphone and my computer, my clothing, my cap, whatever. I can own it and not harm anybody else. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't. I think I'm a pretty decent fellow. I am liked by most people I know, by my neighbors, by my friends, those that have not abandoned me after I broke out of my autism. I'm liked by most people I know. I would say by virtually everyone I know. I am seen as a nice guy. People describe me that way all the time. Mark is a nice guy. Okay, maybe I'm a nice guy. But regardless, as a nice guy, if that's true, I have no problem with owning what I own. But in my view, capitalists should divest their earnings and turn their earnings over to the workers, who would then collectivize the companies that they formerly worked for. And then the subaltern, the truly marginalized or othered people of the world, would be brought into it too. And then they too would become workers They would no longer be subaltern. That is the kind of world that I would like to see. As to the lumpenproletariat, a term that I use like Marx to refer to workers without class consciousness, meaning workers who like capitalism and support capitalism. For example, the MAGA movement, which basically is a pro-capitalist movement. The fact that they claim to support various politicians is really secondary to what MAGA is. MAGA is a pro-capitalist movement. It is a pro-American movement, which is the same as being pro-capitalist. So I don't care which politicians people support. I care about the elimination of the capitalist world system. That is my highest objective. And so, to me, as I make this transition in my podcast from criticizing nations and the leaders of nations to criticizing the capitalist world system, but at the same time offering an alternative, the elimination of poverty and wealth, unity in diversity, and universal love, and above all, intersubjectivity, as discussed by the German philosopher Edmund Husserl, who wanted to see a world in which people bracket or set aside all of their prejudices toward people. The outwardness of most human interactions. Ignore race, ignore religion, ignore philosophy, ignore ethnicity, gender, basically ignore them. I don't mean ignore them totally, but ignore them in the sense that that is how you are evaluating their worth. A person should not be evaluated on the basis of externalities, while those externalities should at the same time be respected. And then engage in intersubjectivity, meaning I connect my heart and my mind with the heart and the mind of another. To me, that is the basis, not only of critical realism, which I have discussed many times, the philosophy of the late Roy Bhaskar and its final development as the philosophy of meta-reality, but also just a general sense, a general transformation of our own natures into beings that care about others through a process, as you can see on the screen behind me, of going from absence to absenting the absence to transformation. That is how I see transformation working. We identify an absence. For example, racism is an absence. How do we absent racism? By becoming anti-racists, dedicated anti-racists, really dedicated anti-racists. When people sometimes say that they are not racist, that is more of a knee-jerk response because they are afraid of being targeted or labeled as being racist. Instead, I think that the proper approach, or a better approach, is being an anti-racist. Because if you're an anti-racist, that means that not only do you oppose racism out there, but you oppose the internalized racism which may exist in your own heart. So You absent the absence that once existed, and according to Roy Bhaskar, transformation then occurs. And so we need transformation in the world today, I would say more than we ever have, at least in my lifetime, which is 68 years. I have never seen the level of problems that I see in the world today anytime in my lifetime. Even the Indochina War, in my view, was not as bad as the kinds of calamities that are happening all over the world. All over the world. We are living in a time of massive upheaval, and that is not a bad thing. Those are the signs of the death of the capitalist world system, the death of the old world order, which will bring the world, I hope, into a condition where the third world and the fourth world can begin building a new future, a future of fairness, a future of socialism, a future of communism, in a world which had already abandoned and rejected its capitalist past. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.